Ah, Ganella, you're back. It's good to see you again, friend. I missed you last week.
Of course, Mr. Pierovich. I apologize. I had something in my personal life come up and had a rain check. Are you doing better today?
Yes, sorry about all that. I got a bit too heated at the end there.
It's perfectly understandable, given the circumstances. Are you ready to continue?
After such a difficult journey and the losses I faced along the way, we stayed in Sully's home for one more day. I did the best I could for funeral rites for those I'd lost. Though I knew I wasn't able to do it the way they'd each probably have preferred, it was still something. Their souls laid to rest, I turned my attention to the two men before me, Belldrop and Sully.
You've mentioned that name a few times already, Belldrop. Isn't he one of the people who fought alongside you against...
Spoilers, child. But yes, he was probably the best friend I ever had. Anyway, the following day we set out, with the ultimate goal being Isocross. We set a course for the city of Letrac, a coastal settlement not too far from where we could better equip ourselves for such a journey. We kept to the coast, a good way to keep a low profile and not get lost, when we were beset by sea drakes. For the first time in front of my new companions, I invoked my runes, doubling to about 12.5 feet tall, and we fought them off. But those nasty creatures nearly bit my throat out. It was a tough fight, but we prevailed and continued on our way. That evening, resting from the travel and combat we'd endured, we surrounded the campfire and begun to share more about ourselves. I conversed with the pair for hours, still resting and being given some medical aid by them to heal my injuries. I learned that Belldrop, a Kenku, was adopted by a clan of dwarves out in Dobria, a long ways off from the town of Silkir, which is where we'd set out from. He was on a quest to find glory for his clan and to find buyers for an ornate set of rings he'd brought with him. Sully's kobold clan was attacked by a band of adventurers because they'd kidnapped some innocents, and Sully was the only survivor. He'd thought what his clan was doing was wrong, and so didn't fight when the time came. Those adventurers found him quite endearing and not a threat, so they, sort of adopted him into the guild. But over time, the guild dwindled, and as the chairs grew more and more empty, he realized he wasn't just hallucinating, but actually seeing their spirits in the hall. But now all that was left there was dust and ghosts, so he decided to set out with us. Then it was my turn. You see, I'm not merely the only survivor of my previous adventuring party. I'm the last survivor of my civilization. For I am from the Age of Earth. So long ago, even the most powerful of beings are unsure of how long it's been. I lived in a great city, arguably the greatest city the world's ever known, with walls wider than a house and taller than a mountain. We used runes just like mine to do everything from wrangling animals to forging unmatched metallurgy to dominating the battlefield. Once, while on a simple escort mission for a diplomatic venture, I met the most beautiful being I've ever laid eyes on, Soln'det. She was an important figure in the city and being sent to do some negotiating with a neighboring city. Of course, it was a trap, and we had to fight our way out. What no one expected, though, was for the respectable elven lady with a divine grandfather to be the mightiest warrior there. We fought side by side, and in the heat of battle I knew there was no one else in the world I could ever live my life with besides her. Luckily for me, she felt the same. It wasn't long after we returned home that she and I wed, and not much longer after that we had our first and only child, Namir, my little spark. It was hard sometimes. I knew she'd outlive me by centuries, and I was often gone on campaign. But the campfire was cold compared to the heat of our love, and so we made things work, until... one day, gods know why, we were attacked. Not by some army, no. If it were, we'd have routed it by the end of the first hour. By him. Tharis, the great worm of chaos. First son of Tenemet the infernal breeder. We made ready, of course. But what were we to do against such a force? To say we fought would be giving us too much credit, I think. He slaughtered us. Surely the full might of the Once-Born will push back this beast, people thought. My unit was routed before I even saw Thoris. And as I readied myself to die for my people, a section of the wall was decimated, shattered, and it fell to the ground as I watched in horror, recognizing the path it took to the ground. You could say I abandoned my post, if there even was a post to abandon at that point. My unit wiped out, walls rent asunder, world collapsing. I ran to my home. The home Soln'det and I built with our own hands to give Namir a chance at a normal life. And I stood on the threshold of the ruins. I'll never forget what I saw for as long as I live. My little spark standing in shock, unable to even cry, covered in the blood of his mother, directly struck by one of the pieces of the wall that had crumbled down. I stood there for what felt like hours, but couldn't have been more than a single moment, before snatching up Namir and running. We had teleportation circles around the city, a final failsafe in case the worst happened. I begged my way through the crowd, covered in blood and dust, my son still too traumatized to even react to what was happening, and a kind man solemnly let us past. The shame burned hot in my chest, tears streaming down my face. But I had to protect my son. He was all I had left. That's when I noticed out of the corner of my eye the man conducting the circle's ritual. He had scales on his hand. I threw my hand axe at his head, but it was too late. I was probably supposed to be vaporized. Gods know how many people that man murdered before I got there. But instead, I was in some sort of strange space between worlds and time. My left eye was exposed to things that my mind has scourged from itself. But it left me with the ability to see things which can't be seen, sense things, so long as they're within arm's reach. When I, for lack of a better word, landed, I was in some sort of farm. I looked down and, to my utter horror, Namir was gone. Scorch marks of his body burned into my armor. I tried to get help, but no one spoke my language. Apparently, it had been so long that the common tongue of my day is considered primordial by today's standards, and it took days for someone with the knowledge required to understand me to find me. Not long after that is when Fastrick found me, and you know the story from there.
Gods, that's horrifying. No wonder you felt so strongly about finding your son. I couldn't imagine going through all of that.
You say that, but I'm simply a husband and father who tried to do what a husband and father should. Protect his family. But where was I? Yes, as I recounted my story, Sully noticed something and asked me to describe Soln'det. Fairly tall for a woman, fiery red hair, pale skin, green eyes. Sully's eyes glimmered with recognition, and I realized that she was there, with us. At least, her spirit was. After so many millennia, she was watching vigil over me as I fought and looked for our son. Tears started to well up in my eyes as I realized that warmth washing over me was all too familiar. It was my tender flame. The night having grown old by that point, not long after we each retired for the evening.
I don't know what to say. That's so sweet. that she was able to see what you were doing for your son.
She'd been watching over me for perhaps my entire journey, and now I knew. I took some solace in that. We might never be together again as a family, but I would find our son, and she would get to see it happen. Maybe then her soul could rest. Back to that night, though. Were I so fortunate to have rested? Instead, as I drifted to sleep, I felt a cold wash over me as a new presence, familiar and yet strange, made itself known. A man with grey skin, odd horns and bones protruding at strange angles, in a black cloak approached me. "You, coward, deserter, fraud." The man approached, and I readied myself. "Who are you?"
"Of course you don't recognize me. You abandoned me, you monster."
In one blindingly fast move, he was upon me, lifting me by my neck from the ground and pressing me against a tree. It was at that moment I realized I was in some frozen, desolate forest, and this was some kind of vision.
"You never tried to find your son, did you? Did you?"
"There is nothing I would not do, no place I would not go, no one I would not kill to find my son, you insane bastard!" I squirmed, but the strength of my assailant was incredible.
"Liar! You don't care. You never cared. You're weak and a fraud."
"I would burn this entire world to find my son. I will kill Paviro, and if you try to stop me from finding Namir, I'll kill you too, no matter how strong you are."
"You mean you don't recognize me, father?"
"What? No. I spent the last 10 years looking. What do you mean? It's been 10 years.
"You liar! It's been 200 years since you abandoned me. 200 years!"
He looked over at me, hood falling off, and I recognized those eyes. It can't be. "Son!" He punched my chest, attempting to rip my heart out. But just as I felt my heart lit aflame, there was a blinding flash, and I awoke the next morning exhausted. My chest had a burn on it, and the others were around me looking concerned. I explained what had happened, then readied myself for the day. No matter what lies he'd been told, my son was out there somewhere in Islecross, and I would find him and bring him home.
Wow, that's intense. I can imagine being put through all that.
Yes, well, it certainly wasn't pleasant, but it honestly changed things for me. This was the first confirmation I had that Namir was alive and maybe not well, but active. I'd go to the ends of the world to find him.
Well, I've thoroughly enjoyed our time today, but I really do need to be going. See you again next week?
Of course.